My name is Christian. I'm the co-founder of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, and I'm very, very happy to welcome you all to this session today. We're still waiting for a couple of people to come, so we will just wait for around 3 to 4 minutes, and then we will jump right into it, and I hope it will be an exciting event. So thank you so much again for joining us, and just bear with us for another 3 to 4 minutes until we start. And again, a very warm welcome to everybody. We're just going to wait for 2 more minutes to see if some more people will come, and then we start with the session. But thank you so much to everybody who is on time and who is taking time to join our session on Post 2020 today. All right. Finally, welcome everybody. Again, good morning, good afternoon, and good evening. It is so good to see almost 80 people joining this session on youth and the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. Thank you so much to everybody for taking the time to join us today. My name is Christian Schwarzer. I'm from Germany. I'm the co-founder of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. And today we want to use the next 2 hours to talk with you about what the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework is and why it presents a unique opportunity to change the course for the world that we're living in and how it can help us to create a world that is living in harmony with nature and why it is so important that young people have a say in this process. We will also share some advice with you, some best practices, some tips on how we have tried to influence the process and the design of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. So thank you so much for your interest in this. I hope this session will be interesting for you. I'm joined today by a very exciting group of speakers from all over our network, as well as from the CBD Secretariat. And I would like to hand over right away to my wonderful colleague, Sweta Strotabashiam. Sweta is from India. She is the Global South focal point of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. And she will join me in welcoming you and share a little bit about our network and how we're working and how we're trying to make a difference. Sweta, over to you.
Thank you, Christian. And hello, everyone. It's awesome to see all the amazing chat already buzzing with excitement and so many people from all across the world joining us today. It's a real pleasure that we are able to have this session with you today. And before we start explaining to you all about the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, we thought maybe we could give you a little bit of an overview of what Gibbon is and why, how and why do we engage with the CBD process, because that will directly link to explaining to you the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework and your role in it. Okay, so let me get right started. So welcome to the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. We are a community and we are a youth-led global platform for mobilizing and empowerment of young people and also taking actions towards living in harmony within nature. So that's kind of our motto. We also are a very vibrant, active movement that is moving towards working on living in harmony with nature and with biodiversity all around us. So that's kind of where we are and where we are coming from. And I see that a lot of you in the chat today are kind of already a part of this network. So it's great to have you guys join us today in continuing our journey together. So for those of you who haven't heard about Gibbon before, we are a youth coordination platform that works on supporting the participation of youth under the CBD. So that's one of our key roles that we play. And when we started 10 years back, this was one of the main things that we had in mind when we thought that young people needed to have a voice in the Convention on Biological Diversity's negotiation process. And we thought we need to have a voice here and we need young people's opinions to be represented here. And that's how Gibbon started 10 years back in Japan. But we very soon and very quickly grew into a much bigger network. And we started doing not just coordinating young people's views at the international level under the CBD, but we started doing a lot of grassroots youth-led projects. And some of the areas of work that we focused on include working on empowerment and capacity building. That's one of the key core areas of work that Gibbon focuses on. We also work on advocacy and campaigning. And finally, we work on mobilizing and creating actions. So with these three elements that we have, we kind of bring them together to actually do the work, not just on the ground, but also at the international level. And we always are very proud to call ourselves a grassroots network of young people from all across the globe. And we are here to represent your voices at this international level under the negotiations in the CBD. And at the same time, do several projects on the ground with you guys, as well as you guys doing your own projects. So that's how Gibbon is structured. So to give you a little more detail of how the policy work goes, under policy and advocacy work, we conduct youth consultations to bring in your opinions and your voices and on key issues. And once we do these consultations, we draft youth positions at the international level, regional and national level. And once we have drafted these positions, we then go into doing intergenerational dialogues where we go and talk to key people in the government, key stakeholders, people in the civil society, as well as media, business, IPLCs, to actually discuss these youth positions that have come up and how do we take them forward. And that's how these dialogues go about. And finally, they also link into our advocacy work, where we are trying to push for these key priorities in several negotiating processes along with the CBD. And we end up the end of, like, the culmination of everything is when we go and participate in the CBD meetings as young people, and give interventions and talk about these key youth priorities that have come up from the ground. So that's like a gist of how things happen in Given. The other side of what happens from the policy side is we do realize that we as young people need to empower more of our fellow youth to join this movement. We need to get all of you to understand these intricacies of what happens in the biodiversity crisis and how do we move forward. And that's why we have a lot of community building, capacity building work and empowerment work. And here we largely facilitate young people in the process of understanding their role in the CBD process, and as well as implementation of the CBD on the ground in the national level. We also, it is a process which is largely with youth-led, and it is where the ownership is taken by the people who have joined this capacity building empowerment process, and they lead the way in their own countries and regions respectively. And you will be talking to many of these people today, and they will definitely excite you and talk to you about all the amazing work that's happening on the ground. We also not just work on that, but we definitely work on building their confidence and engaging them further. And one of the key projects that we have to really push for this kind of community building, empowerment, and capacity building process is the Youth Voices project. And under the Youth Voices program, we have conducted several workshops. We have created infographics. We have created a really useful guide called the CBD in a nutshell. And this is, while initially it was created for young people so that young people can understand how they can engage in the CBD process, it very soon turned into a much bigger publication, because it ended up being used not just by young people, but also by the civil society and by government delegates themselves to understand the process. Anybody new who joins the process is now using this as their guide. And it's really amazing that young people were able to bring it through. And currently this guide is being translated into almost all the UN languages. And it has been downloaded several times, as you guys can see, and it has been distributed. Over 4,000 copies have been distributed worldwide. And this is like one of the key elements that we have, and bringing the knowledge that we were able to culminate into creating this guidebook and several infographics to explain to you what is the state of affairs with respect to the global biodiversity and the negotiations and the targets. We've also created infographics to explain those, and they are also a part of this guidebook now. With respect to the workshops that we do, that I was hinting on in the earlier slide, we have conducted over 8 regional workshops and brought over 350 young people to come together to really discuss at the regional level how they would like to take things forward, what needs to be done for biodiversity, and so on. And you're going to see quite a few of the people who have been a part of this capacity building workshop process who are still with us. We started in like 4 to 5 years back, but they're all still actively engaging with Given, and they are working with us to make things change on the ground as well as internationally. So next slide, Kishan. So yeah, so with all the different things I was telling you about, this is a snapshot of the global movement that we've been able to create. The numbers are actually constantly changing. We now have over close to 50 national chapters. We have around 600 member organizations, and we are now represented by over 1 million members themselves, and from over 150 countries. And they have come together and they have created so many projects on the ground with their countries, with their governments, but also by themselves, youth-led. And we've also been able to give scholarships to over 200 young people to engage with the CBD process, but also with our capacity building work, etc. So yeah, so this is just to show you where Given started as a global network, but how we grew into a much larger grassroots network. And these are just a glimpse of some of the amazing chapters that I was telling you about, that are all youth-led and created from people who are going to talk to you next. And yeah, they're going to tell you about all the exciting work they're doing on the ground. I'm the biggest fan of all these people, and I'm really happy that they're going to talk to you today and share a little bit about how youth movements are happening at the regional level as well as at the national level in different countries. So yeah, thank you so much. And over back to you, Christian.
Thank you, Sweta. That was really, really wonderful. And I hope you could feel a little bit of the spirit and the energy that we have in our network and that is driving everything forward. I apologize to some of the people that posted in the chat. It's a bit difficult to present and follow the chat, but I'll just ask somebody from the team to respond to your messages. Otherwise, we will do it at the end of the event. Before we continue now, we would like to not just make you listen to presentations, everything, we also want to hear from you. And for this, we have prepared a little quiz in which we want to find out what expertise, what experience you have with post-2020, so that we can really make sure that this event will really respond to your experience with post-2020. And for this, I will post a link in the chat. Just 1 second. It should be there. You can click on it in 1 moment, and I will share my screen now. Does it work? Yes. And we have 3 very simple questions for you. So please just log yourself into the AHA Slides link. It's ahaslides.com/IUCNGYS. And then you can answer a question. And it's very simple. We want to ask you if you think whether the post-2020 GBF will actually change the status of biodiversity. Do you think this is going to be possible? And we already have a couple of people that are submitting, so I hope it works. Just please participate in the poll and let us know what you think. Will the post-2020 global biodiversity framework actually change the status of biodiversity? And we have some coming in. Some people are saying a clear yes, others are saying potentially. Don't be shy. Ooh, that's a good one. With sufficient resources. Don't be shy, just click on the link. It's ahaslides.com/IUCNGYS. And I think we have some good points here. There is one person that just wrote birds. Birds are definitely important. They're a key indicator, but I'm not really sure how this is going to relate to this, but maybe you can tell us a little bit later. Political will is necessary. Absolutely, that's the key. Long-term purpose. All right, I think we have 33 people that submitted. Thank you so much. Let's see if we can get to 40. All right, we're close. But thank you so much. This is really useful. We have a lot of good points with more education. That's absolutely key. And we have another question for you, and that is, do you believe young people can influence policy? What do you think about this? Is this all just theater? Is this just tokenism? Or do you think we can really make a difference? We have some good points here. Need mentorship. 100% from grassroots. Wonderful. And one of the main drivers is also mentioned here, more than anyone. All right, this is quite nice. Thank you so much. 30 people voted. Let's get a few more. 39. Oh my God, we're getting practice now with our slides. Thank you, guys. All right, 43. I'll give this a few more moments with a lot of persistence. Persistence is what we're going to talk about in a few moments, that's for sure. People's participation. Okay, wonderful. This is really helpful. Thank you so much. We really appreciate that. I will leave this open, but I think this already gives us a little bit of an idea of what your perspectives are and how we're going to go with this session. I would now like to hand over to my wonderful colleague, Julian. Julian is from Denmark, and he just finished his term as the Danish Youth Delegate for Biodiversity. And he will now share with us a little bit about how the CBD is working, what the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework is, and how the hell we can do something about it. So, Julian, over to you.
Thank you so much, Christian. Just let me share my screen. You can see my screen and hear me well, right?
Yes, it works.
Fantastic. All right, so as you might have seen, Christian was asking some questions in AHA slides in relation to what do you think about the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework? And some of you might be like, oh, what is this post-2020 GBF? Did I just come to the wrong place? Am I gonna be lost for the entire session? But don't worry, because in this presentation, we're gonna go, as Christian says, on the one-on-one on what the CBD is and what the post-2020 global biodiversity framework is, because it's gonna be extremely important. It's gonna have a big impact in the global politics in relation to biodiversity, but maybe not everyone knows a lot on how it works in detail. So we're gonna start by talking about what the UN Convention on Biological Diversity is. So the UN Convention on Biological Diversity, also called as the CBD, was created during the Earth Summit of 1992. It was signed there. In 1992, it happens this huge summit in Rio de Janeiro, where all countries of the world, together with NGOs and observers and journalists, they get together to discuss the current affairs of the planet in terms of environmental matters, and try to come up with solutions on how we can actually solve the different environmental crises we were going through at that time and that we're actually still going through today. Out of this huge summit, we see that it comes different outcomes, among them the so-called Rio Declaration on Environmental Development, but they also call 3 environmental treaties, which are today called as the Rio Convention. One of them was the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change, also called the Climate Convention, and this convention was supposed to, or is supposed and is working today to ensure that we stop climate change. Then was also created the UNSCCD, the UN Convention to Combat Desertification, which dealt with problems related with desertification. And finally, it was also during that summit agreed the Convention on Biological Diversity, the CBD, which is the convention that we as Global Youth Biodiversity Network work with, which is the convention that dealt with all the matters related with biodiversity and the biodiversity crisis and the loss of biodiversity. But what is this Convention on Biological Diversity? Well, this convention, what is an international agreement laying down broad consensus to protect biodiversity and a general framework of action. In other words, what this convention does is that it creates a global agreement that there is a problem in the way that we're doing stuff today, that there is a problem that we are losing biodiversity, and it puts a common action strategy, or like a common sort of set of actions on how to deal with this loss. So it basically unites all countries in the world to get together to find out and take action together on how to stop the loss of biodiversity and the biodiversity crisis. And the CBD has 3 objectives. The first one is the objective related to conservation, which has to do with ensuring that we're not losing species and that we protect nature and that we take care of it. The second objective has to do with sustainable use, that ensures, that deals with the fact that we need to use biodiversity in a way that is sustainable and in a way that it doesn't go beyond the natural limits of our planet. We do need nature for raw materials, for food, etc. But the way, and we need to use nature, but the way that we do so needs to be done in a way that doesn't go beyond actually what our planet can give us. And finally, it deals with the fair and equitable sharing of benefits arising from the use of genetic resources. This is maybe one of the most complex parts of the convention, but put it very shortly, what it does is that when genetic resources from a specific country are used from a specific species, so for example, when genetic resources of a specific plant are used to create a product in another part of the world, then the benefits that come from that use of genetic resources needs to be shared in an equitable and fair way with the countries from which that genetic resources came from. This is a little bit more complex. We're not going to get into that, but just to say that genetic resources is also something that the CBD deals with. So to move on, we can see that the CBD has been signed and ratified by 196 parties in the world, 196 countries, and this is basically the entire world. They have been signed, which means that countries have signed this agreement, but it has also been ratified, which means that this agreement has been turned into a legal national law in the different countries that have signed this. So that means that the CBD has not only been agreed at the global level, but then it was brought back to the national parliaments of the countries, which voted this and passed this as a law and made it into a binding law. There's only two exceptions. One is the US, who signed the agreement, but for political reasons, never turned it into national law in the United States. So the United States is not a party on the Convention on Biological Diversity. And finally, the Vatican. And the Vatican is because of the way they do, not because they're necessarily against the content of the CBD, but the way that they engage into global politics, where they, in many cases, they do take a very neutral stand. So why is the CBD important? Well, first of all, because it creates a global consensus across the world that something is wrong with the way that we are dealing with, we are taking care of our planet, and we need to do something to stop the current loss of biodiversity, and we need to change business as usual. So even if it seems like a little thing, it's actually quite a big deal that countries all over the world get together and agree that actually the world right now, our biodiversity is in trouble, and we need to do something to stop this loss of biodiversity, which is truly worrying. It also provides a mandate for governments to address this loss of biodiversity. So governments, if they want to take action to protect biodiversity or to use biodiversity sustainable, they can come back to their countries and say, well, we need to do this because we agreed this on the global level. But as well, it also creates a platform where governments and NGOs and other actors get together to collaborate and dialogue and meet and find out how to best protect biodiversity and use this sustainably. Finally, it also creates a set of standards and strategies and mechanisms for conserving biodiversity. So it's not up to every country to find out necessarily how to do it, but we do create some international standards that are comparable on how to do so. So actually the CBD becomes an extremely important international meeting point for the protection of biodiversity and its sustainable use, and to ensure that we do have a future where we live in harmony with nature in a way that is sustainable. So the CBD deals with many different areas of biodiversity, concretely has 7 thematic programs of work. It deals with, for example, inland waters biodiversity, mountain biodiversity, agricultural biodiversity. So many different aspects in relation to biodiversity protection and sustainable use. But it also deals with other cross-cutting issues that do impact all those different thematic areas. Things like how the economy works, our trade systems, like the way we educate our populations, the way that we deal with climate change. Those are things that the CBD also deals with because it impacts biodiversity, whether directly or indirectly. An example could be, for example, when we create subsidies. So when we use public money to incentivize a specific economical activity, to what the CBD has rules or targets to ensure that those incentives do not harm nature. This is an example of those cross-cutting issues that the CBD also deals with because, well, these things are actually very important to ensure that we protect biodiversity and that we use it sustainably. So this is just to show that actually the CBD deals with a wide variety of political important matters. And the CBD is organized and coordinated by a secretariat, which is the administrative body of the convention. This is not a political body, which means that doesn't substitute countries when it comes to decision making. That's really up to the countries that have signed and ratified the CBD to actually take decisions. But what the secretariat does is to coordinate this very huge global process and ensure that everything happens in a way that is smooth and that it takes all the different points of view into account, and that, well, that the process goes as smooth as possible. It is the CBD Secretariat is administered by the United Nations Environment Program. It is based in Montreal, in Canada. It has around 75 members of staff, and it is headed by an executive secretary, which some of you might have heard of, and who's called Elizabeth Maruma Morema. Functions that it does, it, for example, organizes meetings, it prepares reports, it helps governments on how to implement the different things that were agreed at the global level. They coordinate with other international organizations, for example, some other UN bodies. They collect and disseminate information, and they do many other things to actually ensure that the Convention of Biological Diversity functions in the best possible way. So the highest decision-making body of the CBD, the structure of the CBD that takes the most sort of disputable decisions, or the most important decisions, is the COP, the so-called Conference of the Party. This meets every 2 years. The next one will be COP15, that will take place in China. And here all countries and NGOs and other non-state actors and many different sort of agencies and institutions get together to advance on the implementation of the convention through adopting different decisions. Here, only countries have voting rights, but we do see that, for example, youth has speaking rights through the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, as well as NGOs, and many different actors do participate in this. And this is where you see the most important decisions of the Convention on Biological Diversity being taken. So it is a space where big decisions are taken, but it's also a space that is a big meeting point for the entire community of people working in biodiversity, from youth to governments to business to NGOs, indigenous peoples and local communities, and so on. So it's a very big deal. And the way that all these decisions are implemented into reality, into national policy, is through what is called the National Biodiversity Strategies and Action Plans, so the NBSAPs. This is actually something mandatory, and this means that whenever a decision is taken in the CBD, it is important that governments then come back to their countries and then make a national strategy on how they're actually planning to implement all these strategies. And this is the way on how we go from these very big meetings in COP and these very big decisions to actually being taken into reality into countries and implemented at the national level. So if you are wondering what is my country doing to implement the goals of the Convention on Biological Diversity, then you need to find their NBSAPs, and then you will find their strategy and their action plan on how to do so. Also, something that is important to say is that the COP is not the only meeting that happens. Actually, there's so many other meetings happening on the side and before of COP that actually do have also a big importance on the CBD. So it's not that the CBD only works every 2 years. It's actually an ongoing process that happens all the time, but it is the biggest decisions that are taken in the convention, the Conference of the Parties. The Conference of the Parties also adopts what is called a strategic plan. And a strategic plan is a political strategy that says, how are we going to ensure, what do we need to concretely do as international community to make sure that the goals of the CBD are actually turned into reality. And the last strategic plan is what it was called the Aichi targets. It's the strategic plan for 2011 to 2020. And this was a set of 20 targets that countries agree to meet in order to advance in the progress on the implementation on the Convention on Biological Diversity. These targets have went from many different things to addressing economical incentives, to making production more sustainable, to dealing with protected areas, and so many different things they were dealing with. And there were actually some very ambitious targets that when these were adopted in 2010 in Aichi, in Japan, we were actually very happy to see that the world was moving in the right direction to actually meet the goals of the Convention on Biological Diversity and to ensure that we were heading towards a future in harmony with nature. Now, after 10 years of having this plan, we actually see that it hasn't gone so well, at least not as well as we expected it would have been if it would go in 2010. This is a report of implementation. As you can see, if in a green means that things are going good, yellow means that they're going okay, while red means that they're going bad. And as you can see, there is a lot of red, there is a lot of yellow, but there's not a lot of green. And what it actually shows is that even if we came up with these very, very ambitious and good goals back in 2010, today, which was our deadline to meet these goals, we didn't get as far as we should have gotten. And this is because of many different reasons, which we don't really have time to go into today, but it really shows that actually we do need to take action and that implementation of what we agree on is in the CBD is extremely important. So where are we now? Because now these targets have reached to an end, and now what's gonna happen now that the Aichi targets are expired? Well, now we have what is called the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, which is the next 10 years, 10-year strategic plan for the Convention on Biological Diversity. So this new deal that will define what will be the actions that we as international community and that the countries across the world will have to do in order to ensure that the goals of the convention are met. So this is still under negotiation right now. It's a very hot topic within the CBD, obviously, and it's something that we're still going through negotiations. And yes, and it will replace the Aichi goals. So it does make sense to put a lot of emphasis and put a lot of focus on this new global agreement because it will define how we will be working with this up to 2030. And the expectations of this goal, of this global biodiversity framework, which is not approved yet and is not approved by the different countries of the CBD, is that it needs to be a strategy that is for all and not only for ministries of environment, that it needs to be an inclusive and participatory process for not only governments, but all sectors of society, that it should get us closer to a goal in 2050 of living in harmony with nature, that will have concrete goals to 2030, and that these goals and targets will be measurable and comparable across countries so we can see how good we're actually doing and know exactly what we need to do best. And as well, we'll have means of implementation. So the tools necessary to put these targets in place will also be in place. For example, funding, that is very, very important. So this new global agreement will be adopted in COP15, as I mentioned before, which will take place in China. Right now it's scheduled to be in October of 2021, but of course there are a lot of question marks given the current pandemics. So right now we're working towards that goal of having this agreement passed in China in October 2021, but we need to see how to get there because the pandemic has definitely made it much more complicated. Before that meeting, there will be a series of other negotiations like SAPSTA and SBI and Open-Ended Working Group 3, which are pre-negotiations before the COP that will lay the grounds and will make the first draft and will agree on how this post-2020 global biodiversity framework should look like before it actually gets finally agreed in COP15. So yeah, as it was said before, we have this CBD in a nutshell publication that Sweta presented. So if you want to hear more about this, then you can always go to our website and download it, and then you will get a little bit more in-depth information on how the CBD works, but as well on many other matters on biodiversity. So that's it. Thank you so much, everyone, for your attention. And I hope I didn't go over time, and if I did, I apologize.
Massive thanks to you, Julian. That was wonderful. I hope everybody now has a better idea of what the CBD is, what post-2020 is, but also a glimpse of why it is so time-consuming to make progress on the international level, because there are a lot of layers to it. I see the chat is going wild, and there are a lot of points that are really important. I love the comment that was brought here. Table talks are not going to work, and this could actually be the title for our panel discussion. So for the sake of time, I would just ask you to please keep your questions for just a little bit longer. We will just have one more presentation, and then we go to the panel discussion, and then you can ask all these questions, and then we really want to have an open and critical discussion about how we can make sure that we're moving from words to concrete actions. But before we do this, we would like to share with you a little bit what are our perspectives as the Global Youth Biodiversity Network on this process. What are the results of all the consultations that we have done? And for this, we have another wonderful friend of mine, Myrna Fernandez from Bolivia, who is following the CBD for the last 10 years. She is the co-leader of our policy team, and she will now share with you a little bit of our political positions on this process. And after this, we start with the panel discussion. So, Mona, please unmute yourself. You can share your screen. Over to you.
Thank you, Christian. I will start.
Mona, it seems like we're having some issues with your connection. So if you don't mind, just send me the link to your presentation, and then I can share it for you, and maybe this will save you some speed. Okay, it's seems to be getting better. All right, I just get your presentation.
Cool.
All right, sorry everybody, that's the beauty of the world that we're living in, and internet speeds are unfortunately not distributed equally. Muna, while it's loading on my computer, maybe you can start saying a few words.
Yes,
but this is your presentation, right?
Yes, it is. It is.
All right.
Sorry for this.
Cool.
But yes, we are actually building a position on digital inequalities because it is something that is very important as well to address. But I'm not going to talk about digital inequalities here. I'm going to talk about the priorities that we have as GYBN for the post-2020 global biodiversity framework. So, well, as Christian said, I am a part of the policy team, and we have been working, trying to develop these priorities and push for these priorities in all the discussions that are leading to the post-2020 biodiversity framework. It has been postponed, as many of you might know. So the COP15, where this new framework was going to be decided, was supposed to happen in October of last year. It was sadly postponed due to the pandemic and the crisis. And now we don't have a clear date yet on when the COP is going to happen, but the discussions and the meetings that are leading to this process are taking place. Actually, the second, the round of negotiations of SAPSA and SBI are going to happen in May, from May to June. So we are preparing for this. We are trying to do a lobby strategy for this, and well, we hope that we can get as many priorities as we can. I'm seeing the chat box at the same time. Thank you for your actually developed a survey on digital inequalities that we shared with our community. We got lots of responses, and based on the survey, we're preparing a report for the CBT. And we hope that our some of our recommendations can be taken into account, because right now we are in the discussion of if the negotiations are going to happen virtually or are going to happen in person. And we don't know what is going to be decided, and we don't have a specific position. We're not fundamentally against virtual negotiations because we don't know what's going to happen with the pandemic. But if virtual negotiations happen, we are proposing some recommendations to address digital inequalities, especially for indigenous people, young and youth, because most of our people engage from volunteer capacity. So we do what we can with our internet speed, but nobody has, or a lot of people doesn't have good connection. A lot of young people has to pay for data. So we are hoping that the CBT can help a little bit, so we can at least participate in a more effective way, and we can reach the young people that is in places with poor internet connections or have to pay for data so they can participate in the CBT. I see that Christian has the presentation already, so I can start with it. Thank you, Chris. So I won't go deep into what is the post-2020 because Julian already framed it brilliantly. So as you, I think, understood, this is going to replace the previous framework that we had from 2011, from 2020, that had the IG targets. So this is going to be a global agreement that will define the global actions for biodiversity for the next decades. That's why this is a once-in-a-life opportunity, because the post-2020 vision goes as far as to 2050. How old are you going to be in 2050? If you think about it, you will realize, yes, this might be a once-in-a-life opportunity. That's why we wanted to build a strong youth position and push for it to ensure that the youth priorities are well reflected in this post-2020 global biodiversity framework. And we developed this youth position based on a number of consultations that happened at the regional and at the national level with the Global Youth Biodiversity Framework and its national chapters. You're going to hear from some of them afterwards. And based on this, we built this youth position that is showing how we would envision an ideal post-2020 GBF. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, so our main goal with this proposal is to have a just, implementable, and impactful post-2020 framework that is going to lead to a genuine transformative change. Transformative change has been defined by IPES, is what we need, a profound change in our whole society and political and economic structures so we can address the biodiversity loss crisis. It should address the root causes of this biodiversity loss, and it should reflect the priorities of the global youth. Can we go to the next, please? Here we're proposing our own 2030 vision, 2030 mission, our 2040 mission, and 2050 vision. We're also proposing goals, targets, enabling conditions, and principles. Just to share with you the missions, we're envisioning that for 2030, the priorities are being taken so we can address biodiversity loss. For 2040, we envision that biodiversity is already a way of life. That means that protecting biodiversity is embedded into our lifestyles in our society. And the vision that we're proposing is living in harmony within nature. That's a little bit different to the 2050 vision of the CBD, that is living in harmony with nature. Can anybody tell me the difference is between the with and the within? We propose within because we think that we as humans are part of nature. We shouldn't aim exactly, Salima. Which means that we are separate from nature. We are proposing that we are part of nature and we cannot try to protect biodiversity outside because it's everywhere. And now we are also part.
But I think we're having some issues with your connection. Can you still hear us?
Did you go to the?
Yes,
I
I'm
can
on
hear
the
you.
next
Can you
slide.
hear me?
Yeah, I think now it's okay. I think your connection was a bit shaky.
Okay, sorry for this. Okay, we're proposing, as I said, we are proposing. So one is the integrity of our life support system. The second one is a society living sustainably. And the third one is equity for nature and for people. I'm going to go one by one and we go to the next.
Mona, unfortunately, your connection is still a little bit shaky. Could you maybe switch off your video?
Is it better now, or
Yes, we can hear you
shall
better.
I try to connect from my phone?
I think we can try it for a bit more. Otherwise, I'll give you a second.
Okay. Let's keep going then. If it's black,
Okay, Mona, I think it's better if you connect to your phone. While you do this, I know we have our other policy co-coordinator in this call, Sefa from the Philippines. Sefa, could you just take over for a moment until Mona is back?
Okay, can you guys
Thank
hear
you
me?
very much.
Sure. Hello everyone, I'm Sefa. I'm on the steering committee of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. Yes, I'll just take over from Myrna then until she comes back. So for the first goal on the integrity of our life support system, we have a couple of key things that we think are necessary to achieve this goal, or that we need to achieve to really ensure that we have a life support system that is functioning. First is ecosystem integrity. Second is the improvement of the status of species and preventing extinction. The third is to address invasive alien species. The fourth is ensuring that there's biosafety, or that the harmful impacts from biotechnology are curbed and addressed and or prevented. And the fifth one is ecosystem-based approaches for climate are in place. If you go to the next goal, Christian. I'm sorry that I'm going a bit quickly, but just so that we can keep time. So the second goal we have is society living sustainably. For this to happen, we believe that we need to tackle consumption, production, and waste, that we reduce and address all forms of pollution, that we reform our subsidies. This is something that's very important because more than 10 times, I think, of the world's resources are going towards harmful subsidies versus what the funding that is going through biodiversity conservation and sustainable use. The fourth is sustainable values, principles, practices being mainstreamed across sectors, not being limited to the environmental sector. And the fifth one is transformative education. This is a priority that has really come out from young people, and I think we'll be talking about it a bit more later after we go through these three goals. Next, please, Christian. So the third goal is equity. No, can you go back, please? The third goal is equity for nature and people. This is something we believe is really, really important. So under this goal, we have a couple of things also. So first is that the benefits from biodiversity should be shared fairly and equitably. And I think Julian explained this really well earlier. The second is that we ensure that nature's contributions to people are ensured for all, especially the most vulnerable, because currently these are not being distributed equally as well. The third is intergenerational equity or justice between generations, and I'll be talking about this, or Myrna, a bit more later. The fourth is human rights and the rights of nature. And last is, of course, the inclusive and meaningful participation of everyone, but especially for those who are being marginalized in terms of decision making. So, and then we have a list of enabling conditions. So all of these conditions that need to be there so that all the other targets can be achieved. The first is resource mobilization. We need enough resources that are going towards achieving these targets. The second is capacity building, communication, and outreach. We all know how important awareness is and also kind of building the capacity of everyone to implement these targets. The third is effective governance and legislation. I think many people can relate to having corrupt governments that is really leading to kind of substandard implementation of targets. Fourth is knowledge, not just scientific knowledge, but also indigenous knowledge, science and technology. The fifth is planning, reporting, implementation, and review mechanisms. We need to be making sure that countries are reporting on their progress and that we monitor continuously how we're doing and learn from our lessons. And last is accountability and compliance. We need to make sure that all actors are being held accountable for their actions.
Thank you so much, Sefa. This was really appreciated. I'm glad that we have this connection between the Philippines and Bolivia. I'm hearing that Myrna is back now. So if Myrna's connection is stable, Myrna will take over again. Sefa, if you could just remain on standby, that would be really appreciated. Myrna, can you hear us?
Yes. I can hear you. I hope you can see me well.
Yes, your voice is clear. So then we continue with you again. Thank you again, Sefa, for jumping in.
Yeah, thanks a lot, Sefa, for jumping in. I think it's not going to go bad because I just bought a data package, so I don't rely on my Wi-Fi anymore. So it shall be fine. I'll continue then with our advocacy priorities, but Sefa just presented kindly is what we have proposed as our ideal goals and targets for a post-2020 global biodiversity framework. But we know that it is going to be difficult to have our ideal youth post-2020 GBF. So we're going to try to advocate for our key priorities within the framework that is going to be developed. These advocacy priorities are first, intergenerational equity and full effective participation of young people. The second one is transformative education, and the third one is human rights and the rights of nature. I'm going to talk about each of them. Can we go to the next slide, please? Well, thank you. So intergenerational equity. This means equity between generations. It means that all generations hold the environment in common with other species. And we share a responsibility in ensuring the sustainable planet for the generations that follow. We are asking for young people to be fully engaged so they can effectively participate in all the decision making that affects our future. So of course, the implementation of this post-2020 at the local and the national levels is one of these key things that is going to affect our future. So we are hoping that this principle is going to be taken into account and implemented in our national level, so young people can be taken into account also in all the decision making that is going to lead implementation. Can we go to the next slide, please? So some of the key points that we are advocating for within the intergenerational equity and youth participation lobby point is first, we are advocating for a precautionary principle. The precautionary principle was agreed in the Rio Summit back in 1992. And it mentions that all the policies and actions should actively account for the long-term impacts on biodiversity. That means if we are not going to be sure that any of these actions or projects or policies are going to ensure that biodiversity is well taken care of, then it shouldn't go ahead until we know that the impacts are going to be managed somehow. We're also asking for the full and effective participation of young people in all the decision-making processes. I already talked about that. Support youth-led implementation and capacity building initiatives. This is super important because we don't want programs that are going to take young people into account, but are designed and implemented by old people. We want young-led projects that are actively supported, but we want young people leading the implementation of the post-2020. And we also want a youth-friendly environmental information available. This is also very important because if you have gone through a lot of the documents of the CBD, the UNFCCC, or many of these environmental agreements, you will see that a lot of this information is composed of very dry and sometimes even boring documents. And we want this information to be youth-friendly so young people can take a grasp and understand what's going on with their environment and what actions they can take to support biodiversity conservation and sustainable use. Can we go to the next slide, please? Okay, a second advocacy point is transformative education. This is important because this has come up as one of the strongest youth priorities in all the regional consultations and national consultations that we have been developing. So regardless of the place or the country, young people always think that education is a key leverage point to create the future that we want. And actually the IPES report also recognizes that at this point, education is key to leverage the transformative change that they are talking about, because it influences behavior change. And that is the key to transform our societies. It refers to strategies and approaches of education and learning that foster a citizenship that is aware of the place in the web of life and in the society, and can lead our society towards a sustainable future in harmony with nature. Can we go to the next slide, please? So some key points that we are advocating for in transformative education. First is that in formal education, that is the education that we have in the schools, we have a transformative education that is first culturally appropriate, so designed for the public that is going to receive this education. That is an education focused on biological and cultural diversity, sustainability, and heritage, in the school curricula and all levels. We are also advocating for informal and non-formal education systems to be recognized and supported, and support also for the intergenerational transmission of knowledge, especially for IPLCs, like transmitted by IPLCs. And finally, a reconnection with nature in our education systems, for example, by learning inside nature. Can we go to the next one, please? Well, there is a vibrant movement in transformative education within GYBN. If you want to know more, please go to the policy brief that is there, or ask whoever of our presentations, our presenters team. We will be happy to provide you more information. Can we go to the next one, please? The last point, and I will rush a little bit on this one because we're a bit late, is the human rights and the rights on nature. This is super important as well because a healthy environment is a human right. And we are hoping that this is recognized within the post-2020 JBF with all the other human rights, because this should be at the heart of the next biodiversity framework. Can we go to the next one? So there are some key points in this. I will briefly mention some of these. I talked about the human right to a healthy, safe and clean environment. We are also hoping to have here recognized the needs of full and effective participation of indigenous peoples, women and girls, and youth. We're hoping also that the rights of environmental defenders are protected. This is super important because we have environmental defenders being killed all over the world every year. And we also want the recognition of the tenurial rights of indigenous peoples and local communities, because if we don't protect the places where they live, we won't be able to protect the biodiversity that they have been safeguarding for years and millennia. Can we go to the last slide, please? Finally, we cannot forget, no, the previous to the thank you one. We cannot forget the rights of women and girls that are being denied in many countries and places, the access to environmental information that is missing in many countries, and we want this to be recognized. And finally, the rights of nature, because we are not only talking about human rights, but nature rights, the right of nature and biodiversity to exist, flourish, and regenerate their national capacities. Because we want also this right to be recognized as it is in many countries, and we want this to be recognized as well in the post-2020 JBF. With this, I finish the presentation. Thanks a lot for your time, and sorry for the internet issues.
Thank you, Mona, for this. I think this presentation and the whole process was also a good example of all the challenges that we're facing, not just politically to make this happen, but also when it comes to the huge digital divide that the world is seeing. I'm glad that we could bridge it today, so thank you for the international cooperation. And maybe this is exactly the kind of spirit of solidarity that we need for our next subject. And that will be a little discussion about how we can all as young people contribute to the global biodiversity framework. And with this, I would like to hand over to our panelists. We have a group of really, really wonderful people that I just would like to introduce to you. And I hope this will be an exciting opportunity for you to learn a little bit more on what can already be done. And this will also be an opportunity for you to ask some questions and to really get into a dialogue. So before we start, the wonderful panelists that we have include Flavia Gonzalez. Flavia is from Bolivia, and she will be sharing a little bit about her work on biodiversity, but also how she helped us to really outstandingly promote an international survey that we conducted on biodiversity. Then we have Bharat. Bharat is from Hyderabad in the south of India, and Bharat will share a little bit about his experience in India. We have Priska Dakar. Priska is from Zimbabwe, and she will share with us about her experience with mobilizing youth in Africa. And then we have Marie. Marie is from France, and she will share with us what Gibbon Europe has been up to in terms of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. And then finally, we have Chantal Robichaud. Chantal is the youth focal point of the CBD Secretariat, and she has been sort of a guardian angel for our network and has helped us to grow and given us a lot of support from the Secretariat side. And with Chantal, I would like to open the panel. Chantal, what do you think, how can young people contribute to the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework? What is your advice to the participants of today's session?
Thank you, Christian. Thank you very much. And thank you, Julian, Mirna, and Sefa for setting the table. It's very useful to have you presenting the CBD and the post-2020 process and the position of Gibbon. But yes, let's look a little bit more closely. Like you've talked a lot about the work that Gibbon has been doing to collect all the views of the youth and to have a position for Gibbon. I'm going to talk a little bit more from the CBD side, how this permeated in the last few years and how this can be done even further. Obviously, the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework is in development under the Convention on Biological Diversity, which is an intergovernmental setting. So it is a party-led process, but the parties have decided right from the beginning that this process should be inclusive and participatory, and so that all of civil society stakeholders could be part of it and contribute to it. That includes indigenous peoples and local communities, youth, women, even also business, academia, subnational governments, many others. But youth obviously have a really important role to play. There's 1.8 billion of you in the world, with a big majority living in developing countries where the biodiversity is most diverse and important. And youth in developing countries depend a lot directly on biodiversity for their well-being, their survival. And it's expected that by 2050, the youth population in developing countries will increase by 62%. So that's even more important to have them involved in the, have you all involved in the development of the post-2020, because it has to be a transformative and iterative process that will evolve over the years until 2050. And you will be evolving and becoming, you know, citizens, consumers, producers, and caretakers, what have you, in the world. So that will be your society. You need to be part of that. And it's important to have youth involved for all the reasons that were mentioned by Mirna and Flavia. You have a particular perspective on very broad diversity of issues like value systems, education, socioeconomic issues, governance system, intergenerational issues, cross-cutting issues. So all these are very important for the framework. And you bring not only particular views, every one of you has a particular view. You're not a monolith. The youth is not a monolith group. It's composed of so many individual people and with different interests and backgrounds and values and identities. So that's important to bring as well, independently of the fact that you are young people. And you can also bring very concrete tools, data, information. You can bring youth-related indicators. You can bring expertise on issue areas that were mentioned by Julian, like marine, climate change, agriculture, new and emerging issues like synthetic biology. You can express your views about these issues and how they will impact your life in the future. Maybe you can express your fears about them as well. But and of course, you need, as civil society, to be able to keep government in check, and so to make sure that what they commit to, that they will also implement. So that's your role also as civil society, to make sure and monitor that and make sure that this happens. But because the Global Youth Biodiversity Network has been so active on the ground, when Gibbon speaks to these forums, the CBD meetings and processes, they're taken seriously because they also bring solutions. That's what's important for governments, and to hear the voices of youth. They want to hear they don't want to hear just youth taking the microphone. They also want to know that youth will be their allies when it's time to implement. And that's been done in the past very, very well by the Global Youth Biodiversity Network. So when the solutions are proposed by Gibbon, it shows that they're not waiting, that youth are not waiting for policy to be implemented, or as someone was saying in the chat, that it's not just table talk. Youth are showing that it's happening now. We're doing something now, and we don't want to wait for you. We want to work with you now to protect and conserve biodiversity. So that's very, very crucial, I think, for the credibility that's brought in the process. And so that allowed for representatives of the Global Youth Biodiversity Network and other youth networks and organizations to be part of the process for the last couple of years, actually, even more than 2 years. They engaged in all, if I'm not mistaken, in all the regional consultations for the post-2020. And I think most of the thematic consultations on marine biodiversity, sustainable use, resource mobilization, capacity building, review reporting, potentially biosafety and ABS. Maybe you can tell us about that. But Gibbon and youth have been involved right from the beginning in these consultations with parties. They've, of course, taken part in all the subsidiary body meetings, the Substa and SBI. They've been very actively involved in the open-ended working groups that was specifically created to follow the post-2020 process. So there were 2 meetings already. There will be a 3rd one this summer. Gibbon has submitted written comments and proposals, and that was also part of the process. They obviously on their sides did so many consultations, trainings, and brought publications in the process that were shared with governments at all levels. But again, what mattered the most, I think, was the fact that at the national level, in more than 40 countries, there are Gibbon chapters at the national levels, and these were able to communicate with their national focal points and get themselves known by government officials. And that's what reverberates so well when it's time to go into the meetings. And so very quickly, where we are now, after all these activities in the last few years, we're at the moment when we have an updated zero draft of the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. The first draft will be presented after the 3rd meeting of the open-ended working group, which is planned to happen in August. All the dates that I'm going to give now are subject to change. It's being discussed as we speak in the meetings of the Bureau of the Conference of the Parties. It's going to be official very soon. So in the next few days, there will be official notifications on these dates. But at the moment, the plan is to have the meetings of the subsidiary bodies starting on the 3rd of May and going through June, because there will be only a few sessions every day to make sure that everybody, all the time zones, can participate. So it's going to take place over several weeks. I'm sure the Global Youth Biodiversity Network will be fully prepared to intervene on the items being discussed at Substa and SBI. And then after that, after those meetings, there will be that first draft will be prepared so that it's ready for the open-ended working group in August. And then the final draft, sorry, I made a mistake earlier. So it's the final draft that will come after the open-ended working group, and that will be presented to COP. At the moment, the dates of the 15th meeting of the Conference of the Parties is from 11 to 24 of October. So that's kind of like the timeline that's coming up. And as I said, Gibbon and youth constituencies and organizations and network will be part of this process all the way to COP. And I really look forward to continuing this process with all of you. And I'm very pleased to see you all and in big numbers, and to see the motivation and the interest in the framework. So thank you for the opportunity, and let's keep a bit more time for the discussion. Thank you.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Chantal, especially for all your words of support and encouragement that we can indeed do something. And you mentioned it again and again. It is important that we do not only look at the international process, but that we can start at home, that we can do some things. And a wonderful example of this is what my colleague Priska has been doing in Zimbabwe. So I would like to hand over to Priska, who also brought a little presentation for us. And you will be quite amazed to hear what she has been able to manage in her country. Priska, I hand over to you. If you could do it in
Yes.
like around 3 to 4 minutes, it would be amazing.
Yes, thank you so much. And I owe this success to my colleagues that work with in Zimbabwe. And I'll just talk about how we have been engaging young people in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework process. So we did our first consultation back in 2018 and 2019, and there was like 8 meetings in 8 cities, and we partnered with 7 other partners. These were all youth groups, and some of them were clubs at schools and universities. And this was because at that time we didn't have any funding to host our consultation meetings, and that's a challenge that we faced. But because we are young people, we got creative about it and to say we don't have funding for this, but we still want to have these consultations. So hence we partnered with other organizations in other cities to avoid us traveling to all those cities. And we also use technology to also just engage those partners, because it was also the first time for them hearing about this post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and where to create sort of like a training guide for them. And we used WhatsApp to communicate and ensuring that them as the facilitators understand what is it that we are trying to achieve and why we wanted to engage young people in this process. And this consultation mainly focused on what is the CBD, the ideas for a global framework. And this was when the process was just starting with the consultations internationally, and also focus on young people's aspirations, especially in Zimbabwe, and also just introduce them to the NABSUB, which is the document that Zimbabwe uses to implement the CBD convention in Zimbabwe. One of the things that we also did, because these were like online in-person meetings, that was before the whole COVID-19 pandemic happened. So on the next slide, you see one of the pictures of the meetings that happened in Bulawayo. That's before the education. And this one we partnered with an organization called Green Heart. This was at an American space. And this space, we used it free of charge. We didn't have to pay for anything. And if you're in a country that has a US embassy, you can also reach out to them and ask if they have these American spaces. In some countries, they might be called American corners. These spaces have got all you need for your meetings, whether it's your projector, your mics, all the technology support you get free of charge. So you don't necessarily have to have that as an excuse to say, because we don't have funding, we don't have space to have consultations. There's a lot of things that you can do, like as young people. That's why we're energetic. We come up with these ideas so that we engage and engage our leaders. And after this consultation, we also had an online consultation, which was supposed to be in person, but because of COVID, we moved online. And for this one, we partnered with the African Wildlife Foundation, the Zimbabwe office. And this was attended by more than 300 young people, and focused on issues to do with gender issues, use of biodiversity, sustainable use of biodiversity. And it was also attended by representatives from our National Biodiversity Office, which was really great for us, because when we started our consultations, we really didn't have anybody from the government as a representative to just talk about these issues. But as we progressed and as we engaged more, they started listening to us, and that's how we've been engaging with them. The first thing we did was just to approach them, introduce ourselves, what YBN is, how we are linked to GYBN, what we're doing at an international stage, and also what we want to achieve in Zimbabwe, and just expressed our desire to engage young people, and for young people to be engaged in policy and management of biodiversity at all levels. And so after this consultation, one thing that we realized was there's a group of young people that also got left behind because this was online, and yet youth in rural communities were not able to attend this meeting because of internet access and even the cost of internet. Because for this one, AWF really helped us out in terms of like providing some funds for the young people who attended, to buy internet data, which is very, very expensive in Zimbabwe. And that's one of the main challenges that we face, especially if we're having meetings online. So we came up with a youth engagement. Please go to the next slide question. Yeah, so we did the youth engagement in rural communities project, which also partnered with AWF to go to rural communities and have in-person meetings with them. And these we do based on COVID restrictions. If it's safe to travel, we do that. And so far we've done 2 rural communities. And it's great to hear the different, aspirations that young people have. I'm talking from young people who lives in the urban area and the young person who lives in the rural communities. Their priorities are different, and so that's why we try to engage different youth groups to ensure that we capture all their wants, all the aspirations before we produce a document to say we engaged young people in Zimbabwe. And so for our next plans, after this is to engage, to do an intergenerational dialogue with our government leaders and other partners as well, and to also present our position paper that we have created. And we look forward to doing more of youth engagement, as well as coming up with action plans, more of capacity building trainings as well, because as young people, we need to have those training so that we know how to participate, how to engage, as well as doing more of advocacy and trainings as well. So that's what we're doing in Zimbabwe, and thank you so much for listening.
Thank you so much, Priska, for this. This was really, really enlightening, and it's very, very hopeful to see that you're also engaging with people in rural areas. I think this is one of the greatest challenges that we're having today, reaching out to people that do not have good internet access. And I think this is a wonderful example of how it can be done, and also how it can be done with very little resources. So thank you so much for this inspiration. Well, we're now turning to a speaker from a completely different region, from one of the most unique cities in the world, from La Paz. And we have talked a little bit about how to engage rural youth now, but there's also a lot you can do when you're in an urban area. And as the Global Youth Biodiversity Network, we recently launched an online survey on post 2020, where we asked people to share their perspectives on what they want to see in the post 2020 Global Biodiversity Framework. And we have been actually shocked because we got a staggering amount of responses from Bolivia. And the reason for this is Flavia. Flavia, please share the story with us.
Hello, everyone. Do you hear me? It's okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Oh, perfect. Actually, I have the same problems as Mirna, so maybe I will disappear eventually, but I will start. Okay, I will talk about the positive and negative aspect that we face during this process of the survey, promoting this survey. And well, actually the positive aspects of promoting the survey was that we asked for help from many organizations, and they give us their support. So they start sharing our survey, and it was kind of amazing because we didn't expect that support. And eventually in the time, because we have like 2 months promoting this survey, a TV show shared our post about the survey, and it helps a lot because we got like 300 responses in that week actually. So we got a lot of help. We didn't make it alone, and I think that sometimes we were scheduling that sometimes we have to talk to people or talk to some organizations in order that they share it our our survey, right? But it was not only the survey that we promoted, but we actually share information. And we share this information in a simple way to understand, right? I mean, we explained what was the CBD, okay? What was the COP? And we explained what was the given, this movement. And we explained in order that they get the idea that we are doing something for biodiversity, and the youth had a space to talk and to give their opinion, and this opinion will be considered, right, from the people that make the decisions. So I think that we share this idea, and this post was very popular in the last 2 months, I think. So I think that that was the key of our success, if we can say, in this event, I think. But one negative aspect, and I realized it when I saw the result, is that even if we get a lot of responses from the urban area, we have a little low percentage from the rural area, right? So that is because here in Bolivia, it's really difficult to get a good internet connection. I mean, even if we, like Mirna and I, we live in La Paz city, we have terrible internet connection. And can you imagine how it is in rural areas? I mean, and it is not about having the resources or not to get a connection to get the connection to internet. It is about the quality of the signal, and it's really difficult to get the opinion from people, from youth that are in the urban areas, right? So that is the negative part of this. So my advice for you is, if you have something that you want to share, you have to ask for help, for other organizations, for other people. And if you have in mind a period of time that this information has to be present or has to be popular, so you have to schedule in order that some organization will share it in the future or in a week or tomorrow, and it will be popular. This post will be really popular in time and in a really definite period of time, I think. And something negative too that I realized is that even if we talk with a lot of organizations, like more of 40 organizations, I think only 10 or 12, I think they supported us. So I think that we should be destroying these barriers between organizations, because it's really difficult to get support from them. I mean, we talk with them, we send messages, we send invitations, and they just ignore us, many of them. So you don't have to just invite one organization or two. You have to invite as much as an organization as you can, and then you will get an answer from few of them. But this is really helpful. As you see, we get like more than 600 responses, and it's only because these few organizations share it, they supported us, and this helped that other people share this post, and eventually a TV show, I think, saw that this post was really popular, and they share it, and that was the week we got like 300 responses. So it's easy, but it's a constant job that you have to do, and you have to talk a lot. You have to talk with a lot of people. That's the key of our success, as I can say. But yeah, that's all, I think.
Thank you, Flavia. This is really inspiring. And I think you mentioned a lot of key points that we cannot repeat often enough. Destroying the boundaries between organizations. Sometimes in the biodiversity community, we're talking about breaking the silos. But the silos are not just between the biodiversity community and the climate community, but also between us. We need to realize that we can only change something if we work together. And this is what Gibbon is all about. We want to be this platform where everybody, no matter what organization you belong to, can come together, because if we do it alone, it's not going to work. So thank you so much for this example, Flavia, but also for telling us about the challenges. I think it's important that we keep this in mind.
Christian, I would like to add something.
Sure.
It's really important you to share information in a simple way. I mean, we didn't we shared this post, but it's only was shared because people understand what it is about. I mean, they understand that they can be part of a COP, they can be part of changing the world, they can be part of this CBD. But it was only because we explained it to them in one slide in a simple way. Do you get the idea? I mean, it's really important that you explain a message in a really simple way in order that they get the idea and they will understand and they will share it, the information again. So that is really, really important too.
Thank you so much for adding this. I think it's good that we keep this all in mind. When it comes to simple messages, I would like to hand over to our next panelist, Bharat from India. Bharat has been working with Gibbon for, I think, more than 7 years now. And Bharat has a lot of experience, especially engaging with communities in the rural parts of India. So, and I think, Bharat, you also helped to organize the first virtual youth consultation back in January. So maybe you can share a little bit what you guys did, what kind of participants you had, and did you manage to engage people from the rural area? And do you think Flavia's advice in terms of simple messages is right?
Thank you so much, Christian. First of all, I'm very happy to be among the amazing panel members. Yes, I do agree with Flavia. This digital inequality do happens in many regions, and of course, in India also we have the same issues. But I think we are recovering from that. Having said that, let me begin by saying about my experience of working in my country. 8% of the world's biodiversity is in India. 4 out of the 36 biodiversity hotspots are located in India. But still, many of the youngsters or even adults are not aware of the amazing biodiversity and wildlife around us. But inherently, many of us do value nature and biodiversity. So, nearly 65% of the India's population is below 35 years age. And we are the world's youngest nation. In this context, given India and team passionately wanted to involve in this consultation process of post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, and when we opened the applications, nearly 200 participants registered their names, and a quarter of that number participated and engaged actively in the virtual event that was held in January. During this event, we used analytical and critical methods, thinking methods we applied to engage the participants in understanding the core issues related to biodiversity loss and what do they think. Many of the participants engaged quite well, but I just want to draw out some key points here. No, they felt there should be a genuine relationship between youngsters and nature. I'm using the word genuine relationship. And this can be achieved through many ideas, innovative ideas, psychological, behavioral, and perspective transformation of education. When we say transformation of education, there are many ways again to achieve that. But there are certain ways that we can achieve. And these are, in the Indian point of view, spiritual connection with nature and art and culture. Now, the spiritual connection with nature, when I say, in the ancient yogic text, I know when I say spirituality and yoga, you might be thinking about stretching your body, is all those things. No, I'm not going there. I'm just saying the quote from the ancient yogic text, which clearly describes human beings as having 5 layers of experience. 1, environment; 2nd, physical body; 3rd, mind; 4th, intuition; 5th, ourself and spirit. Now, the same text clearly says that when a human being has a very positive experience with the environment and nature, all the remaining 4 will be taken care of. You'll find balance. The other point on art and culture. Now, all the other sectors in the world, you take corporates, advertising agents, all the Microsoft, Google, they are using stories to tell to the people, connect with the people emotionally, which is missing in this field. Now, this CBD has to think in a serious way, because the last time I remember Edward Norton in 2011, who was a goodwill ambassador for biodiversity, I don't remember later on who was the goodwill ambassador. Maybe like someone can enlighten me on this. But my point is that we need storytellers, we need actors, artists, because they are the one. Do not undermine them, because they are the one who could connect emotionally and change the perspective of people very quickly than you can imagine. Now, during the process, there are many concerns we raised. And as I said that we are 65% of our population is very young, which means 700 million young Indians. Now, with this number, with this amount of young population, there will be conflict of opinion between economic progress and nature conservation. The details of which I'm not going further. I leave this question to the listeners here. Now we have to learn from the mistakes that we have committed in the past decade. The generation is changing. So we have to be very flexible with the youngsters itself in implementing the next post-2020 targets, which are soon going to out in October 2021. Now, there is another common concern with the Indians, especially, mostly. We are not aware of who is our CBD focal point. So when I don't know my leader, how can you expect that I'm going to approach, like how I'm going to tell my issues? Because every alternative years, our CBD focal points changes. It might happen with the other countries too, but this is one concern. So given India, one of the things given India is trying is to connect that dot in strategizing how youngsters can be connected with the CBD focal point. Ladies and gentlemen, my dear friends, my dear colleagues and dignitaries, let me share from the bottom of my heart this urgent warning. Our massive tampering, our massive tampering with the world's interdependent web of life, coupled with environmental damage inflicted by deforestation, climate change, and species loss, could have widespread adverse effects whose whose effects we may not understand perfectly, whose collapses we may not understand perfectly. Before we realize that there is time and we need to like change everything, nature can hit us back very badly, and COVID-19 is a classic example. As Gibbon member, I would say I'm very, very, very optimistic about post 2020, because when I see at the international level and when I see at the ground level, the work happens and many youngsters when I meet, yes, I'm very optimistic. And I will be very hopeful that this process like contribute in a better way. I quote from the book Sapiens from Sir Yuval Noah Harari, who says very clearly in his book that a Homo sapien mind can be changed, molded in any way. But for that, you have to engage with them when they are young. So I conclude by recollecting the poem written by Sir Bankim Chandra Chatterjee in the year 1870. Vande Mataram, Sujalam Sufalam Malyaj Shitalam, Shaste Shamalam Mataram, Vande Mataram. It means I bow to Mother Earth for providing rich water streams, bright orchard gleams, cool winds of delight, dark fields waving Mother of Might. Thank you so much on behalf of Gibbon India as a representative. I'm very glad and honored to be speaking in this panel. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bharat. This was truly a very unique statement. I'm very happy how you made so many connections, especially with traditional Indian cultural values. That's something that is, of course, important for biodiversity conservation, but that is often forgotten in this conversation. So thank you for making these linkages. Finally, before we enter into the discussion, I would like to hand over to Marie from Gibbon Europe. And Gibbon Europe has engaged in a very sophisticated process where they consulted a large number of youth organizations all over Europe. And Marie will present a little bit of the outcomes of this process. So Marie, over to you.
Thank you so much, and thank you everyone for being here and attending this discussion questions and summarize what we've been doing in Gibbon Europe. So as Christian was saying, we are a regional chapter, so we had to make sure we could be representative of European youth. And that means we had to reach out to many different organizations because we couldn't reach out to the whole youth living in Europe at once. So what we did is that we made a list basically of all youth organizations, environmental or youth councils or student unions and youth political parties that are existing in Europe. And we contacted them and we asked them for written documentation they had on biodiversity. So either their positions, or if they didn't have them written, then we asked them to answer some questions about their priorities for biodiversity conservation, but also the obstacle they were foreseeing for the coming decade in future years, but also what they were expecting from decision makers. And that was also what we were very interested in. So we had responses from 42 organizations, 16 that were only nationals and 8 and more, and the rest that were pan-European or multinational organizations. And basically we summarized all of this, comparing it with the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework Theory draft. And from these documents, when something was mentioned in more than 50% of the time, so that when it was making the consensus across organizations, we identified it as a youth priority for European youth. And so we compiled all these youth priorities, so there were 6 of them, in a document, and we shared this document with all the participants, but also with European stakeholders. And then we organized 2 events. So the first one was basically to build capacity with a participant, so representative of organizations. And we had a really good training when we presented the summary and we explained what was the CBD and how it was working in the European context. And then the second event was for the participant also to have some time to discuss with other stakeholders that were working actually with the CBD in Europe. So we had a representative from the European Commission, we had a national focal point, someone from a consortium of environmental organizations, and someone from an environmental ministry. So that was really cool because we had some time for people to really talk to these people. That's what youth want usually, to be able to have this time to talk. And then we really provided this space and we were very happy about it. I'll just give you a few tips of things we learned in the process. And if you want to apply them or if you need to apply them in other kind of situations or consultations, I think it was really important to try to be as diverse as possible and reach out to youth outside of the environmental sphere. So it was really good to have student union and youth councils and youth that are very engaged, but they don't all know so much about disability and what is at stake. And I think they really appreciated the training on the CBD. And it was also very, I think, motivating to have this intergenerational dialogue at the key point at the end. So that's, people were really interested in that. And something that we would like to improve on is because we are a regional chapter, we don't have so much capacity to work on the national level, where it is very important for youth to reach out to their own government and have their own intergenerational dialogues with people within countries, because that's a very important leverage point for the CBD within countries. But yeah, I think if you have any questions, I think we'll be very happy to answer them. And thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Marie, for sharing this example with us. I think we have seen a lot of diversity from different parts of the world. And what you can also see is there is no right or wrong. There are different ways. There are so many different aspects that need to be included. And all these ways can be very valid and lead to good outcomes. With this, I would like to open up the discussion. I see we have a lot of messages in the chat. I think we already have some questions. I'll get to these in 1 second, but just to start off a little bit, there was one question that came up a couple of times, and that was about focal points. I think we mentioned this in our presentation. National focal points are the people that coordinate implementation of the CBD in their countries. And I think all of you have experienced this challenge, that it's very important to get in touch with them. But how? So I would like to ask the panelists, what were your tricks? How did you manage to reach out to them, or did you manage to reach out to them? Who would like to respond to that? And then I go to the questions from the chat. Chantal, maybe you as representative of the Secretariat, is there any official way to get in touch with focal points? And how could young people do that?
I wouldn't say there's an official way, but there's an easy way to find out about them, who they are, and their coordinates, even their phone numbers and email addresses. On the CBD website, there's a list of all the national focal points. I think that if you have something interesting to share with them, showing that you are working on implementing the convention at the national level in their country, I think the first advice would be to simply inform them about what you're doing. I think a few of the of my co-panelists here have said that's in Zimbabwe in particular, I'm thinking that's how it happened. So they were sharing information and it took a bit of time, but in the end they had representatives coming to their activities. So I think that's a very interesting way of doing it. First sharing information, showing that you're implementing the convention, supporting their work, and then inviting them and having discussions with them. And that was very interesting to hear about these stories.
Thank you, Chantal. Anybody else that wants to share an experience with regards to national focal points?
I'll not repeat. Chantal already mentioned what I was going to say, but I think one of the easiest things that we did was seeing that there was that disconnect between young people and the National Biodiversity Office, and also us just realizing that there wasn't much activity happening. So instead of just them seeing you posting stuff online or seeing things in the newspaper, bashing them or talking bad about them, I think just doing that approach, just send them, if you have an email, send an email, phone number, call them, just set up a meeting where you're just meeting with them and yourselves, and just do that. Introduce yourself so that they get to know you, and so they understand, oh, this is what you want to get involved in, this is what you want to do, these are the plans that you have. I think it's that way you can you build a good foundation of communication, because these are the people that you're going to be working with throughout. As long as you have the CBD, as long as you have a framework to be implemented, as long as there's biodiversity to be protected, these are the people you need to be engaging and having discussions with them, and also showing them why we should just go from sitting down and discussing to actually doing actions that actually where we see biodiversity being protected, where we see biodiversity loss being reduced. So make that connection. Do not be afraid to reach out to them. I know sometimes as young people we hear that, oh, people in the high offices, political offices, no one is going to hear us. But sometimes they open up the door. If you make that first, if you reach out to them first and say, we just want a meeting, just to sit down with you, get to know us, we get to know you. And yeah.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Priska. I see that we have Bharat, and then I would go to the question from the chat.
Yeah, I think very simple thing, Christian. I mean, to answer that, we have like social media, Twitter and other social platforms where you can reach out to your country political leaders like Prime Minister very easily nowadays. So like if you're having difficulty in reaching out to CBD focal point, you can also reach out to the politicians, which is much easier actually in some of the developing countries.
Thank you, Bharat. And now I have a question from Francesca Ridley from the chat. And she has some very interesting questions that I would like to read to the panel. And it would be really nice if one of you could respond to that. Her first question is, are there plans to implement a mechanism for holding governments accountable to their promises with regards to the post-2020 framework once it has been agreed? Member states have failed to implement the necessary actions to reach CBD biodiversity targets time and time again. Why will this time it be different? So this is the first question. And the second question from Francesca is, the current mechanism of countries reporting their progress towards CBD targets through the MBSAPs focuses heavily on domestic actions and progress. Given the extensive and growing evidence that developed countries offset their domestic progress by importing their impactful resources, are there plans for the post-2020 framework to hold countries accountable for their global as well as the domestic impact? All right. Anybody that wants to respond to this?
I can try.
Wonderful.
So yeah, so I think it's for the accountability of governance, it's a very difficult question that is coming often because it's a very important one. But in the CBD, since in the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework, since it's going to be agreed with a consensus of countries agreeing on this framework, I think it would be unlikely for countries to make themselves accountable at this stage. But Christian, please correct me if I'm wrong or if you think this can be complemented. But then I think it's also very important at the national level because the countries are presenting their national strategy through their NBSAPs, and then that's where they can put some accountability into it. And I'm not too sure which country or if their country leading on this way, but I think that would be the points where there can be some accountability if it's coming from within the country. But at the international level, I think it's unlikely. And from the global and domestic impact, I don't recall. I don't recall anything specific on that, but I just wanted to highlight that this came up also the youth priorities in the consultation we did in Europe, and that's something that was mentioned under the big topic of sustainable consumption and production, and that it was one of the priorities that youth wanted to have this sustainable production and consumption in Europe and outside of Europe. Yeah.
That's really great. Thank you.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you, Francesca, for the great question. I see another question from Meha Kumar. I'm just going to quickly read this. It's about how challenging is it to make an agreement with a country's government to put strict laws on animal abuse? For example, banning completely with strict penalties on dolphin slaughter in Taiwan, shark fin soup in Asia, and live animal markets in Vietnam. If it's okay, I would love to give this question to Chantal, because from my point of view, the post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework is not going to cover animal abuse. So Chantal, why is it that the CBD is not dealing with that part?
Hi, Christian. Yes, thank you for the question. That's a very, very good question. And why is it not being dealt with? I cannot say for sure. I mean, there are discussions for a long, long time among countries, among regions at the global level. And this issue has been mentioned a few times, but it hasn't necessarily been picked up. I think it will come under the targets and goals related to species conservation. But in terms of trying to have stricter laws at the national level, again, it's not necessarily going to be part of the Global Biodiversity Framework. I think this will have to be done at the national level by civil society and other kind of stakeholders that are interested in this in these issues. I invite you to bring your voice to the conversation and to maybe chat with the Global Biodiversity Network members and see how that could be brought to either at the national level in the discussion or even at the global level. But I find it an interesting question, and I'll bring it back with me. Thank you, Christian.
Wonderful. Thank you, Chantal. We also have an animal rights lawyer here, by the way. So Priska, I'm sure you can add something too.
Yes, you just talked about a subject that I can talk about. I think it's not just the CBD that exclude, animal, as you said, protections, specifically like abuse and animal welfare. So it's quite a discussion that's even going around. So how can we use international policies, international laws to ensure that animals are also protected? We're talking of the issues of rights of nature as well, and that's a discussion that we even have within our community to say, can animals also then claim rights through the recognition of the rights of nature, and also just ensuring that animals get that protection that they deserve. And it's not just protecting animals, but also preventing, the extinction of species, that we are currently seeing right now, so a lot of discussion is going on in terms of how we can do that. But as we know, animals don't have recognized rights right now. So it's a discussion that if anyone is interested, is get engaged, and so we ensure that our animals are protected, and we ensure that all the abuse that we see of animals, especially marine species, a lot of issues are happening there, and because they live out in the oceans, out in the seas, we don't get to see them every day. So there's that disconnect between humans and even advocating for the protection of marine aquatic animals. Thank you.
Thank you, Priska. I see we have a lot of questions coming in. I'll try to get to them. I just saw some comments that came in. There was one comment that was saying that ambisubs are often being prepared without consulting primary stakeholders. Unfortunately, this is true. This is still happening in a lot of countries. As Gibbon, we're trying to fight this. I think the CBD Secretariat is also making their best efforts to call upon parties to make sure that ambisubs are being prepared with proper consultations, but we cannot force countries. But it is a fact, and it's something that we're trying to address. There was also a question from how can we participate from Venezuela? I think that's a question that is valid for every country. In the online processes that we as Gibbon are organizing, they're open for everybody. So no matter where you're from, as long as you have an internet connection, you're welcome to join these and participate. Normally, when we don't have a pandemic, we're also organizing international youth delegations to CBD meetings. Because of the pandemic, we don't know when we're going to meet up in person next time for a CBD meeting, maybe in October for the COP. And if we have the possibility, we will open this up, and then of course everybody can apply to receive support to join a CBD meeting in person. And then I'm seeing a question that reads as follows. Since this is about the post-2020, but also post-pandemic framework, are there specific goals implementing a One Health approach, preventing further pandemics, or will this aim be addressed rather passively by promoting conservation actions? How was the demand with respect to this topic by the young people you interviewed? I think this is a question for all the panelists. Who would like to go first? Anybody that
I can try to go, Paul.
Thank you, Marie.
Sorry.
Sure, go ahead.
So I think it's very, yeah, okay, I'll be brief so someone else can complement. Yeah, I think it's an important topic. We didn't in Europe, I mean, the One Health approach was mentioned in the submissions we read, and I think that's something that appeared, but we didn't, it wasn't mentioned enough time to come up as a youth priority. However, I think it was very important for everyone. But I think I think it will be probably, I mean, there is a lot of discussion now at the international level, and it has becoming quite an important topic. So I think I would assume there would be discussion around it, maybe in the COP or beforehand. But so far, I don't remember having seen a goal like that.
Thank you, Marie. Anybody else from the panel that had any experience with that?
Maybe me. I
Sure.
don't know.
Please, Flavia. Thank you.
Okay. Recently, I have seen many events where they are trying to integrate climate change with threats to human health and biodiversity loss. So I think the new movement that is creating, but is kind of new since this year, I think. So that's the only thing that I saw that may implement this part of health or threats to health, that is trying to, okay, let's going to converge the solutions for this global crisis. But it's new, something really new, I think.
Thank you, Flavia, for this. And I think we have to close quite soon. So I will just go to a last question that I saw. Marie, there were also people asking about the Gibbon Europe chapter and how they can get involved and where they can get access to the paper. So maybe you could share some links in the chat. The final question that I would like to address to all the panelists before we do the closing round is, will this global biodiversity framework also address the protection of biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction? I think this is something that we probably have to give to the Secretariat. Chantal, do you have any views on that?
Hi. Yeah. Yes and no. It's a question that I could bring to my colleagues in the science division. But what I know is that the CBD is really for national jurisdiction. In particular, the issues of biodiversity or biodiversity beyond national jurisdictions is really related to marine issues. So marine biodiversity addresses that quite a lot. And I think if you look at the current draft of the post-2020 framework, you will see goals, targets related to marine issues. So that would be my first reaction to that. But I invite you to look a bit more closely at issues related to marine. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you so much, Chantal. We're a little bit over. Please go.
Just regarding the biodiversity beyond national jurisdiction, there has been very little youth engagement so far in this context, and there will be an event next week on Tuesday in the afternoon with ICES Alliance and the Arctic Youth Network, and we'll be talking a little bit more about that if you are interested. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Maybe if you have a flyer or something, please leave it also in the chat so that people can join this important event. I think biodiversity beyond areas of national jurisdiction is becoming a hot debate. So definitely make sure to join this event next week. All right, we're a little bit over time. We have a few minutes left, so I would like to give all our panelists the opportunity to just make some closing remarks if you would like to, and then we have to wrap up the meeting. And maybe in your closing remarks, you could just like share some ideas on how you think we could move forward, what you think is going to be important in the next months for young people that want to engage on biodiversity. Shall we start with our first speaker that we had? Chantal, what do you think are going to be the next milestones in the coming months?
Thank you again. Yes, in the next few months, I would say keep a close eye on what the Global Youth Biodiversity Network is doing. They have so many activities happening in the regions and at the national level. I think this is your best entry point for what's coming up in the post-2020 process. You can have a look at the documents that are being prepared and studied by all stakeholders for the upcoming meetings of SBSTA and SBI. So have a look at that on the CBD website. You'll find all the documentation on all the issues that we talked about. Get more familiar with the CBD documents, the CBD timeline and calendar of events. So again, what's coming up is in the month of May, the SBSTA and SBI. Gibbon is very involved in this. So if you work with them, you'll have a good entry point. And then after that, it will be for you to keep an eye on what's going to happen at the open-ended working group on the post-2020. And then that will take us to the meeting of the COP in October, where we will see what kind of format it will be. It's supposed to be taking place in China. So again, if you keep an eye on what kind of events will be happening there, that would be interesting for you. And again, yes, continue to take action on the ground. That's really your strength. Continue to bring your expertise and the results of your work to your national governments that will be taken up and brought at the global level, definitely. And again, through Gibbon is really a good way of doing it. Thank you very much. It was really a pleasure to be among you today. And I wish you a very great Global Youth Summit that's continuing for the next few days. And then I hope to see you again in the process related to the CBD and the post-2020. Thank you for inviting.
Thank you so much, Chantal, also for your continued support to us. Priska?
Thank you so much, Christian, and thank you for giving me this opportunity to speak to many young people. My last word is, it's not too late to get involved. There's a lot that's happening. There's a lot that needs to happen. So young people, we need to engage. As Chantal mentioned, GYBM is a good starting place. Check out our website, check out, we are on social media, we are on TikTok, we are on Instagram, Facebook, everywhere you find us. We are always constantly posting information about what is currently happening, how you can get involved. A lot of our chapters are also doing consultations. So check the website if you have a chapter in your country and what they're doing, what activities have been planned, register, participate. It doesn't matter even if they've done 20, 30 consultations, where you're starting is a great place to start. And we also have the Youth Manifesto as well, which was GYBN is part of that, including other youth organizations and institutions, mostly young people that came together and came up with this Youth Manifesto and an open letter. And we're going to be doing a lot of campaigns to promote this manifesto. So again, check out our website and sign the manifesto. More than 10,000 youth have already signed it, and we need more signatures. We need more of your voices. We need you to be involved in this work that you're doing. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Priska. And we have Flavia.
Sorry, Christian, can you repeat the question? I just disconnect for a minute.
Don't worry, we're just asking you to make some closing remarks on what you think could be the next steps for young people in the coming months to engage with post-2020.
Okay, I think that we should be creating this community that you said, this big community where we work together, because it's better when we work together. Actually, the impact is bigger. And also we should be creating these, how do you say, workshops maybe, where we're still talking about the CBD, the COP, our role on all of this process that's about. So I think it is really important to keep making these capacitations or workshops to still educating people.
Great. Thank you so much, Flavia, for this. And we have Bharat.
Thank you, Christian. Well, my closing remarks would be, yes, very soon the post-2020 outcomes will be out. So I'm very optimistic, as I said before. And given India is going to do several meetings, so I think anyone from India in the chat, they can follow the Instagram page where we keep updating about how we are doing. And you see, like, we can have post-2020. After that, then what we have to do? So that's the question mark. So we have to reach out as youngsters. We have to reach out to the most influential people, the Pope leaders, the gurus, the leaders of the governments. It's very easy nowadays. Use social media, Twitter. Your message will reach out to them very quickly. So, but you have to do in a very strategic and smart way. I know, like, most of the youngsters want to be very emotional, but they can be like, do it in a very smart way. And this is one of the directions that they can, all of us can follow. So it's not just about till post 2020, even after post 2020, what we have to do, we have to strategize. So in this approach, youngsters have a lot role to play. So this is my closing remark. Thank you so much for giving this wonderful opportunity one more time.
Thank you, Bharat. And least but not last, last but not least, I'm also getting tired. Marie.
Thank you. Well, I'm last, but not least, maybe. Yeah, I can only agree with what everyone said. I think there is so much space for youth engagement, and please do feel free to reach out to GIB and the international community, but also the national and regional chapter, because the work will be continuing after the post-2020 COP, and there will be a lot of action to do at the local level as well. So it would be great to have everyone included. And I think also feel like it's a very inclusive community, and I think everyone can find a way to engage in the way that they are comfortable with and feel like that's for them. So don't feel pressured in any ways, but just find a way where you feel you can contribute and you can do your part. And yeah, everyone's welcome.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everybody, for joining us. A big applause, please, to all our speakers, all our presenters, and all our wonderful panelists for sharing so much wisdom. I hope this has given you a glimpse of what is going on in the CBD, what this post-2020 Global Biodiversity Framework is all about. And especially, I hope it will give you a little bit of confidence and especially a little bit of hope that we can make a difference, that we can contribute to this process, and that it's not just about climate, but that there is a lot happening in terms of biodiversity too. Thank you so much, everybody. I wish you a wonderful evening, night, morning, whatever it is. And I hope we can stay in touch. I think some links to our network were posted. You're all more than welcome to join and become part of this wonderful community. Take care, everybody. Bye.
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 Hi, Christian. Thank you for the invitation.
Bye.